doesn't look right in the 3/4, and or else I'll notice that, oh, this is off on the 3/4 compared to the side view. So, just go back, clip it out, rescale it, throw it back on the drawing. That's another beautiful thing about digital, man. You can just chop it all up and redo it again without having to erase it or start over on a new piece of paper. But as you can see, I like using the bluish pencil. I used to do that a lot when I drew by hand, and I actually created this blue pencil in Painter to kind of suit that style. What it comes from is a lot of the old animators used to start drawing their characters with the non-photo blue pencil, and then they could go over the line work with a black ink pen or black pencil, and you could photocopy it, and it would make all the blue lines disappear. But I actually use the blue line as just part of a design element, and I always just like the looks of that light blue drawing. Kind of gives it a neat look. And it seems to take real well, too, in Painter versus drawing in black all the time. Sometimes the black gets real jaggy, but with the blue, it kind of, I don't know if it tones it down or what, but I just like the appearance of it better. So you can see what I did. I'm kind of filling in the other side of the cockpit, just figuring out, the mass and how it's fitting all together. And then you can tell with the scoop up there, I kind of added as paneling, as if that scoop was placed on top and riveted down. Then right now I'm kind of adding a few belly tanker style ideas where that would be like a clamshell thing put together. Decided I didn't like it. So now this is just kind of like an open hole down there. There's another intake, to the engine. So this here, I'm looking at some of the suspension, or not really suspension, but landing gear on the airplane, and implementing it into the arm there that holds the wheel, and figuring out how I can make that work for suspension, or how the wheel's attached in a different way versus just your typical swing arm and all that stuff. So I'm just giving it a different look. Thinking about a new type of suspension or something. And even, say the guy that built this car, he worked in the Air Force or worked in the Navy, and, he was able to get his hands on scrapped airplanes. Back then it didn't matter. So say he grabs a few scrap parts and, he uses those to build his hot rod. Definitely thinking of a scenario always makes the car more believable, and it helps your design aesthetics as well. Like, it helps you stick to what you think should be. You're not combining futuristic stuff with old technology. You might be taking the old technology and applying it into a different source, which kind of gives it a futuristic look, because people aren't used to seeing something like that. So putting on the steering arms, figuring out how this car really works. So you can see my reference just slightly pop up there. Looking at things. And I'm not really even copying it exactly. I'm more or less looking at it and using it as a guide for how I think the suspension could look. Again, my center line. Figuring out how the thing, bows out and comes back in. And again, using the paneling lines actually as a line to kind of indicate the mass of the body as well, so it looks like structure. Cutting in the holes for the axles in the back. And just using a typical straight axle setup, just because that's what someone probably would do if they built this car. It's basic, it's made for speed, and so just drawing in my shadow, it kind of places the car on the ground that way. It also helps with perspective as well, to kind of see where my car's sitting. Make sure it's not sitting too high or too low to the ground. Drawing in my shadow for the suspension. Come back in, just fill in some lines. Putting in my ground shadows. So you can see in my side view that the car sits, higher in the back. So, the shadow is going to be on the ground, and you can see more space between the shadow and the car towards the back versus the front. So you want it to match the same thing in the side view. So again, just putting in some paneling here and there, figuring out some details. This is where I really start, I have the base of the car down, so now I am messing with details and figuring out how to get things to look. So now I'm drawing, this is the major and minor axis. Now I'm throwing in guidelines that really determine where my axle needs to fall. And it also determines where I'm going to be placing my circle templates to clean up the wheels. And I'm using a straight edge to do this. And so that's actually considered your minor axis. Now your minor axis, like I said, is the axle line. So now I'm using my templates, and you can see how it's cleaning up the wheel quite a bit. And again, cleaning up the back, you can see where my wheel was slightly off. Again, you can kind of tell how the wheel gets smaller in the back, versus the front. So that really adds some dimension to your drawing. And that's a key thing when you do your ellipses. Usually your front ellipse can be anywhere from 35 to 45, anywhere in there. And then your back wheel will be 10 to 15 degrees off of that. So if you're using a 45 up front, then your back will be about a 30 or a 35. You can, the more degrees you add, so if you're adding, say you used a 35 up front or a 45 up front, and you decide to go with a 30 in the back, that it's adding more distortion to the back. If you go too much, it's going to look too funny. But if you do enough, it adds that whole fisheye lens effect to it, which kind of adds some dynamics. So here you can tell I'm putting the dish in the wheel and adding the thickness of the tire and the rim and all that, just so it's in there. And you can kind of tell where things are falling. So again, splitting it all up into the 10-spoke rim, like I did in the side view. And you can tell they're kind of off, but it's okay. Like I said, it's still a sketch. If I really wanted it perfect, I would either build it in 3D. That's usually your best bet. Then you can really put it in the same perspective as your drawing and fill it in nice and tight. And making wheels in 3D programs is actually fairly simple. And there's a lot of free 3D programs out there anymore, so you can get this stuff and make your wheels for nothing, which is kind of nice. And you can really clean up your drawing that way too. So just adding a few details to the other side of the wheel there. Adding brakes and, connection points and all that. So adding a caliper. And some of this, don't really sweat the details. Put stuff there that it looks like it makes sense. But don't go in there and noodle the whole thing and keep working on it. Get it to look good so it shows your concept. So you can see my rough drawing there, and then I turn it all off. Now I've got a clean sketch that I can use and people can understand it. there you go. Thank you very much.